This workshop is going to look at two potentially very confusing species, linnet and twite. Linnet is a common but declining finch with around 410,000 pairs found throughout much of the UK and Ireland, with the exception of the higher Scottish mountains and some of the northern and western isles. Its winter distribution is similar, although it does move out of the higher areas of its breeding range. It is found in a wide range of habitats, but is perhaps most familiar as a bird of coastal habitats, scrub, heathland and, especially in winter, farmland. Twite, on the other hand, is very much a bird of the Celtic fringe during the breeding season. Only 10,000 pairs breed, most in Scotland in the uplands and islands, with other populations in the Pennines, North Wales and the northwest coast of Ireland. In winter, the birds move out of the higher mountains and can be found in lower parts of their breeding range, and also in coastal locations around the country, but especially in the east, but absent or very rare only from the south and west coasts. There is much overlap between the two species ranges in both seasons. In the summer though, adults should be reasonably easy to separate, but in winter it can be somewhat harder. Both are principally ground and low vegetation dwelling finches. They are the same size, slightly bigger and bulkier than a goldfinch, but not quite as big as a chaffinch. In summer, a male linnet is striking, with a chestnut brown, unmarked back, rose pink chest, silver grey head and pink forehead. The females are duller, lacking the pink chest and forehead, but showing shadows of the chestnut back and grey head. In all plumages, the throat appears paler, and even when marked has cold tones. The grey head is not plain, and most individuals show a pale spot on the cheek. This can actually be quite striking. The conical bill looks well proportioned and is grey year round. The belly is pale and only ever lightly flecked, even on young birds in winter. Twite in summer are warmer plumaged birds. Although the same size, they have subtly different proportions, being slightly lighter weight with longer tails and, for me a key feature, noticeably smaller bills. The back is heavily patterned and the whole bird gives an impression of warm brown with darker streaking all over except the belly. The throat is unmarked but is a warm buffy colour. Field guides always point out the unique pink rump, and if seen, and it is only present on summer males, it is a clincher, but it can be frustratingly difficult to see. And remember, females and young birds lack it. So, a combination of warm colouring, unmarked throat, heavy streaking and tiny beak should be enough in the breeding season to identify twite. If you are familiar with linnet calls, it can help you to pick out twite. Linnets have a wide range of calls, but the most usually heard are a dry, buoyant jit-it, jit-it, jit-it. This is often heard by birds as they take off or fly over. Also, linnet often utter a fairly long, nasal, buzzing cheep, almost like a plastic toy trumpet. Twite have a similarly wide range of calls, some almost indistinguishable from linnet, but most are harder and faster. There is one useful characteristic call, chewy, that says twite. Indeed, this apparently is where the bird's name came from. If heard, this should be enough to tell you that there is a twite about, but frustratingly it can be hard to pick out amongst all the linnet noises. Song is much less helpful, unless you are very familiar with one or the other. As with so many of the finches, both linnet and twite string together a seemingly random selection of calls. Listening for the inclusion of the described calls can help. Both have lovely twittering songs, but each bird seems to sing a slightly different variant. In winter, confusion is more likely. All linnets moult in late summer, and the winter birds are duller than in the breeding season. There is usually, however, still a ghost of the grey head and richer chestnut back. Crucially, the bill is still grey, and many birds still show a pale cheek patch as well. Despite their wide distribution in winter, twite are very rare away from their well-known wintering sites. The best clues to separate twite from a linnet is to look at the subtly different shape. The warm colouring with, in winter, a noticeably orangey buff head and that tiny beak. And helpfully for us in the winter, the bill of Twite is a very noticeable yellow, very different to the grey of Linnet. This feature remains throughout the winter as well, usually darkening in March to April.